I think that people stop worrying about judgment.
Yeah.
People have been told, oh, you can get over this, pray it away. The church is...
All right, we can't get it. I grew up religious. Like, we went to church all the time, like every day. But
I did too.
Like, you can't pray something physically wrong with you away.
Well, don't you know when people don't claim the illness that it's not really there? Because they're like, I'm not claiming that.
Just ignoring, just like, it ain't here. It ain't here.
I ain't claiming that.
Nah, that ain't me.
The doctor said I got high blood pressure. I ain't claiming that. Well,
that's a lie.
It unclaimed you, so.
I think sometimes we just forget that we're still human beings. Yeah, I think it's important that everyone should know their status. Knowing your status is the first step to really kind of having that conversation. I think it's important we learn how to tackle stigma and get rid of it. I think it's such an extremely amazing thing that I get to do this every day and meet such great people and learn their story and share some of their story with the people that watch us every day. To remember to stay hopeful in victory. Welcome back, guys. This is Dusty Lion and this is Hopeful in Victory Talks. I want to thank you guys again for watching another amazing episode this week. But I got another special guest with me today, so I'm going to go ahead and let her take it from here to introduce herself.
Hi, I am Denika McMillen. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. A little bit more about myself. I always have to say this. I was born and raised in Chicago.
We had this argument earlier.
Because if you did not have to run after a CTA bus to get to school, you're not from Chicago. I grew up in the city, went to school downstate, got my master's degree in social work at the University of Michigan. And I am 20 years post-grad. So I've been doing this social work for about 20 years, whether it was in shelters, community mental health. Gosh, I think I did. I've worked in hospitals. I've worked with people who were infected or affected with HIV, whether it was mothers who were pregnant who were positive, as well as kids who have been infected from birth, and even some newly diagnosed patients. And then I also worked in Chicago public housing. So I think I've done just about everything as far as social work. And now I'm currently doing private practice work. So that's just individual therapy, whether it's involving depression, anxiety, and those are mainly the two that people deal with.
Do you work with, do you still work with people who are HIV positive as far as therapy work and things like that?
Actually, I have not had anyone who has come to me who was positive. Maybe they didn't know their status or they just didn't talk about it, but so far, no.
That's interesting because you have such a wide range of credentials where, honestly, you would be an amazing help to a lot of communities if you were there.
Yeah, the one thing that I definitely run into is insurance because I have to get paid. Yeah. And the thing about public insurance, like Medicaid, is it's really hard to get paneled with those, with the U.S. Medicaid, in whether it's Illinois, wherever. And then there are also a lot of steps. There's money that slows the process down. But I do know that those are the people who really need it the most because anybody who's on Medicaid has had some hardships. That was actually originally why I went into social work. I had a professor who is actually pretty renowned now in bullying, who talked to us about the different degrees. You can get a master's in counseling or a master in social work. Yeah. And so we talked about each one of those processes and who you would work with. And the thing about counseling was you probably work with people who could afford it and all those things. And so I thought about it. I said, who really needs help? And I saw, Black women, people of color who have all these hardships and trauma that don't have an outlet. So I picked social work. And so here I am, social worker here in Illinois, but right now I'm actually in the suburbs.
Okay.
And that's how I ended up in social work.
That's amazing. So you had a history with working with people who are HIV positive, depression, anxiety, people who are on Medicaid, Medicare. Are those two are not interchangeable, because I was on Medicaid for about 3 years, and like you're right. Honestly, it is kind of hard to like try to get the help that you need, because like I'm still paying off medical bills from my Medicaid days, because either the state was behind and couldn't make the payments, and I don't want it to like hit my credit, or the fact that the bill is just extremely high, and like I got a bill that was like over $2,000. Like, so
imagine being impoverished anyway, and getting bills like that. You're just never gonna get ahead.
You're never gonna get ahead, and it's systematic too, that it's that way. Like, it's set up to have you just kind of be in that endless cycle, and like just that repeated trauma over and over again, where it's like, fuck, like, can I curse?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, fuck. Like I'm in this cycle.
Because everybody's in the same boat.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, how can I help you guide your ship when my ship is all moving around? You know, so
right.
That's the thing. We have a cycle that sometimes we don't even know we're a part of, because it's just the way life is.
Honestly, that's our topic today. In a sense, it's not the full topic, but the reason why I asked Denika to come and speak with me and to speak with you guys is to talk about mental health. To talk about the social disparities within the Black community.
Societal issues that, you know, even now, the whole trying to ban people from being from serving in armed forces, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, extremely ridiculous. And I was like, why? Who is that affecting? Like, why would you not want people to help their country, help people? We had the whole Reconstruction period, the second Reconstruction, where like, you know, it's helping Black communities, and you had all these Black business owner, but then like we intentionally, well, not me, but us, the states, intentionally like put bugs in these different flourishing programs to just knock us back down. Like, thanks for your help, but like, you Black,
they
like, we
didn't
gotta remind you
right
that.
So like the GI Bill, that, you know, people who were white were getting to buy homes, and, you know, the whole redlining, and I think the Love It homes or something that happened, I think in New York, where they built these communities, and they basically said you cannot sell your house to anybody Black. Yes, Levittown. That's what it was called. That's
what we're doing now. The name just changed, but that's still prejudice.
Redlining.
Yeah, it's
gerrymandering. All of
that. In your experience, like, why isn't that not being advertised?
Well, I think that mental health is hard for all communities to deal with. In particular, in the Black community, they go with the whole "it's a white thing."
Yeah, I've heard that before.
That's a white thing.
Yeah.
We
don't need that.
We've been dealing with all this stuff all this time, you know, and then
do it just fine.
Right, and with the whole, I went to a training last year talking about the strong Black woman, and the capes that we have to wear, and how.
I just want to interrupt you really quick. Are you giving me chills?
Black women have to be the strongest for everybody else. And so, who takes care of them? Nobody. That's why, like, when I think about the people, everybody needs help, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, you think about the health of women, mortality during childbirth. Like, there's so many issues. The fact that Black families are losing the men, whether it's through violence or the system or something like that. And so they have to hold everything together. And how? And so, actually, I have to say this. Things are starting to change a little bit as far as Black people coming to therapy.
That's a good sign. I hope it's a good sign.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, it is, because
right.
Yeah. So with the Black churches, we have put so much into
So much
things
power.
that are right, but things that are outside of our control. And it's true, we don't control as many things as we think we do. But as far as taking care of our health,
Yes.
our mental health is just as important. There are a lot of ideas that we have in our head that just aren't true. So back to the strong black woman, as far as kids, the perception that kids aren't necessarily really kids. I think that there's a lot of adultified kids where they're not seen as children and being able to play, right?
Yeah.
They have all this responsibility put on them, and if you never get a childhood, then what? So we have a lot of things that plague us, whether it's stuff we can control and things we can't control. We talk about racism, but because people are not so overtly racist anymore, it's the microaggression. So I have to say that most of the people who come in that are of color do talk about microaggressions. And sometimes when they go, and another thing is they may have had a bad experience with a therapist.
I definitely have one of those. Yeah.
So that's another thing. Like, there are cultural barriers that if you have a not so good experience with one therapist, you may be like, well, I'm not going to therapy because that don't work, right?
I know I said that specifically happened with me, but like my first therapist that I went to, he was a Latino man and very relatable. He wasn't gay, he was straight, but he just knew. And when you see this, what you mean, like, what do you mean he knew? He knew, like, the struggle. He knew the things that I've gone through that I don't have to
explain.
I don't have to explain myself. And like that irritates me when people who come off that way wants me to explain myself. I'm like, I'm done explaining myself. I shouldn't have to explain myself.
That's true. There's something called cultural competency that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to.
What's that? Educate us.
Okay, so cultural competency is being competent about different cultures.
Okay.
What's acceptable, what's not. So there are books that think that or people who think that when a person of color is upset, they're out of control. Or a certain thing that may be different to them that has happened. So a therapist doesn't know life.
Like work and they're like, oh, she's like ghetto or professional, kind of like
and
that.
And so those internal biases or what they call implicit biases can sometimes play out in therapy sessions. So if you are with somebody that understands, then, and I've been told this a lot of times, because I do get a lot of women of color who come in and they say, I don't have to explain. Now, we have not lived the same life. This is true. But the systems are still the same no matter where. You can be probably in a whole nother country, but if you're black, we're going to relate. Because of the treatment or the thoughts that have, stereotypes that have been spread about people of color, especially black people. The whole thing about even just now, health insurance, right? This whole thing about...
That's a huge one, too.
Obamacare, and, people want to take it away, but don't realize that that's what they have. And everybody should be... Sorry, I'm going on my whole... healthcare for all.
Go on your tangent, please. This is a safe zone.
It's needed, because healthcare means healthcare for everything. Whether it's mental health, physical health, there's some other kind of healths, but those are the ones that really stick out, right?
The ones we're willing to talk about.
And so in my years of doing therapy, or even just working with people in the shelters, there is a different way and approach that people of color can understand when you're working with them. You can call people out a little bit more, be like, girl, and then they be like, you're right.
But it's true.
But somebody who is not comfortable, so that's the competence, right? Knowing that in in certain cultures, we'll just say when I worked with, like in the Asian community, one of the things is people don't always have eye contact because, you know, sometimes that could be seen as being disrespectful.
Too much eye contact.
Right, too much eye contact, right? And so then say a therapist who is not competent enough to know about the background and the culture of an Asian person might think, oh, this person's being distant, or, you know, like those miscommunications of people's behaviors, the way they talk. So I have always had a pretty laid back type of way of dealing with people.
You seem like a very laid back person too, by the way. Like when I got here, you're very laid. I'm like, she's very like chill. Like is she like analyzing me? Like I'm not sure. I'm like she's just.
That's the way I am.
Yeah.
That's the way I am.
It's not a bad thing. I just wanted to say that because like you're very laid back.
Well, actually, you know, someone just started with me. You know, I was going to say because therapy is becoming more accepted. There are now websites you can go to and find people. You know, Psychology Today is one, right? But
that's how I found you, by the way.
Yes. But there are websites called Therapy for Black Girls.
Ooh, she just gave us a plug-in. Ooh.
Yeah, Therapy for Black Girls. And that's how some people have found me because they're looking for therapy for Black girls.
Yes.
And they want somebody of color. So they can just skip over this whole process of dealing with somebody who might not understand. There's something else called Melanin and Mental Health.
I heard about that.
Yeah.
I recently heard about that.
Yeah, so there are places now for people to go where they don't have to feel isolated or know that this does exist for them. Because, like I said, it's a white thing, right?
Or even feel like they gotta like find it. They had to go search for it, and if they can't search for it, they don't know how to search for it. Go to someone who isn't black and like I'm looking for this and come out that way. Because like I tell my peers, I'm like the reason why I stopped going to my healthcare provider and because I want to find a healthcare professional that's A, he either is black or B, has some form of capacity of queer life. Just he understands that because they in my case they play hand in hand. Yeah. So like that's what I want. I want to be able to like I'm already comfortable talking about my provider about things, but I'm like I want my provider to really understand like when I'm bringing up this issue, he knows that it's an issue that's more severe to me and why he knows why that matters.
Yeah.
And I know how to explain it to him. He just knows like, hey, you're HIV positive, you're black. I see your understanding. I see your concern with this. Let me throw some resources to you that actually helps you and not just take you to some general information. Because unfortunately, I'm not a general person.
Yeah. So sometimes what I'll do, because I am a person, like I'm generally open with people, is if they're looking for something, we'll look for it right during that session and try to evaluate if it's something that'll help them. Yeah. You know, because sometimes people just get referrals places and it may not be exactly what they need. But yeah, I was going to say it's someone found me, I think, on Psychology Today. And this was somebody who had...
Sorry, y'all. She was having a moment, but my camera had its moment. Yes. So we're going to try and bring it back.
So, yeah, I was working with someone for the first time, and we were talking about trust issues and how they couldn't trust people, but they were also dealing with grief, right? And it took about 4 or 5 months before this person came and started talking about grief of their mother, who was their closest person. Like they did everything with them, right? Yeah. And so
that person that they would need, like in that
moment, so when they're feeling bad, that person was gone. And so I actually asked them, I said, out of all the therapists that you saw on Psychology Today, you know, what was it? He said, well, I saw a lot of people and everybody has the same kind of credentials and all this stuff. But he said, you have a trusting face. And I was just like, never heard that one before, okay. But okay.
I'll take it.
if that's what it is.
Let me add that to my credentials.
But I do have a lot of people who approach me. I guess maybe I'm non-threatening. One, I'm not that tall. But I also, for the most part, speak pretty softly. And like, this is me. Like, the way I am now is how I usually am. So I don't usually get too hyped up about anything. And actually, one time I was in an interview for a job, and then later I called them, and he said, you know, the thing about you is you seem like if there was a storm going on around you and like the water was streaming past, you'd be on a rock. Still just being peaceful, like in a...
Just like, yeah, I'm glad we just both did that.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's generally, I am pretty much the way that, and you probably ask my mother, I probably always have been like this, but I think that's a part of what makes me who I am. I'm not like anybody else.
It makes you unique. It makes you unique. And I wanted to go back to you said something earlier about when someone, cultural competence, when someone is acting out of line, they're out of control. And I wanted to dive into that a little bit because I mentioned to you that I wanted to talk about some of my experience where I experience where I can really take that moment and say that. And I always talk to myself about this because it's always good to talk to yourself. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I talked to myself, and there was one time when I was growing up, I was a very angry kid. So like I would, and I wasn't sure. I'm not sure if it was from my sexual assault experience and not just being vocal about it. I wasn't sure what it is, but I would always get into trouble at school. And I grew up with a single mom, and so like my mom would have to get off work, come to the school and like put some fear in me, and then it'll set me straight for like the next half hour, and then like, you know, maybe a couple of days I'll have another moment or tantrum or episode, if you will. And what made me start thinking about that cultural competence is because how my teachers were handling that. So before, when I was telling Denika, when we moved to our first suburb, I was in 4th grade, and pretty much it was a culture shock. Like it was the first time I was around a lot of Caucasian kids. And the next grade, I was already put into like special education. And I'm like, for some reason, and then I look back and it was because I was like, they didn't understand like where I was at, how to teach me or how to do that. So they placed me in this program, but then this program did not know how to handle my situation because they brought me in here and they're just giving me this general information. And then when I have an episode, they would like constrain me, hold me down and things like that. And like, I would just, you know, just be angry all the time and like, wasn't sure what it was. Yeah. And it was because the system, I fell through the cracks within the special education. The system failed you. The system failed me. Exactly.
And that's actually one of the things that continues to come up too, because I mentioned that I also am a part of a diversity council in my school district, is how punitive they are toward kids of color. And social emotional, because you know, social emotional is actually coming up a lot more now, and I think that in Illinois they're trying to make it a part of everyone's curriculum by 2020, and to be socially to be aware of people's emotions, right? Yeah, so I have to say my kids, I have twin boys, and they're very smart, but they just act differently. You know, one of them gets bored and he doesn't want to do it. You know, he's not. His intellect. His intellect is there. He just gets bored. So I'm like, I'm wondering if he's in the right class.
Like being challenged.
Is he being challenged?
Exactly.
I think it's just for boys. It's different too. In the fact that they don't know much about black boys in these schools, they just go to one thing. It must be their behavior. They don't know the life that these kids are living. They don't know if they're being fed at home, if they're being abused at home. But it's just it right. So. You know, how often do they have them go talk to the social worker? Before they just want to punish them.
Exactly. And that was the thing. Like, I'm a very intelligent person, very smart. And even in 4th grade, I was very smart too. But like you said, you don't know. And at the time, I think it was a cultural shock. We moved to the suburbs because I was hit by a car. Me and my brother were in the hospital for months. Like, I had broke my right femur. My brother was in a lower body cast. And after that, we went to the suburbs, and it was like, say goodbye to your friends and your school. We had this huge goodbye gathering.
So this is the thing. You talk about you were angry right? But before you moved to the suburbs, were you this angry kid?
No. Oh, I was happy. I had a crush. I had friends. Like,
so let's talk about that. Anger was because that was traumatic for you to go through that accident, and I'm not sure if you ever had any therapy about that.
I have not. Okay. No, that's
right. And then you were moved. And then you moved someplace where you didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
Right. So you were essentially like, pulled out of something that was working for you into this thing where people didn't understand you, nobody looked like you, and that's important too.
It is.
This is why we have been working to try to get more teachers of color. And what people don't understand, that even if you don't have a lot of kids of color, having a teacher or people around of color enriches the environment for everybody.
Everybody, it does.
So it's not like this whole thing of we just need teachers of color for the kids of color. No. There are things that people can learn from interacting. Yep. We are so much more alike than we are different.
Exactly. And I wanted to add to that, there was this TED Talk I was listening to, and I'm going to make this short. The guy had brought up a friend who was writing his biography when he was a kid, and he said his nanny was a black woman. And there was one moment when Martin Luther King had gotten assassinated, and she was in the kitchen crying. Yeah. And so the kid, he went in there when he was young. He said he went in there and he talked to her, and he was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" He's like, "Oh, they killed him. They killed King, our leader." And he's like, "Oh, well, Christ, Jesus had died on the cross for our sins." And this kid was saying it to her, and then she like smiled, sent him on his way.
I'm gonna look at this in a psychological.
Okay. Take the wheel, girl.
I don't think that I don't know how old this boy was.
He had when he was doing it, he said in a talk show he had been like 12, 10.
Okay. So him not knowing the relevance of it is a little bit of innocence, right?
And then yes.
And so the fact that he brought up Jesus, which is the biggest idol in black communities, right?
Yep.
He actually made it seem as though King was a Messiah.
Yeah. And I thought it was a good thing.
Right. So the fact that I really think the boy was actually consoling her by accepting her feelings and not necessarily saying that's wrong for you.
Yes.
So I don't know. Well, let's talk about it. Let's just say it and we'll see if we can explain it.
Okay, so he was trying to tell his friend, like, if you're going to publish this, say the message in a different way, because you're telling it from your perspective. Like, this is your view versus hers. Like, it wasn't her, it wasn't from her perspective as a black nanny, a black woman who was crying, who had lost this person she had, this Messiah that she idolized in their community. And so, and instead you're making this message about you, and it's not about your nanny. And so what I was trying to connect is when you have a black voice or a minority voice within a majority ran of Caucasian facilities, entities, whatever it is, a school system, you have a black teacher there or a black Hispanic, any minority there, it elevates everyone. It makes everyone's perception a little bit better, and that's what I was trying to connect with those two. Was like when you tell that story, you're telling your story from a privileged perspective and not from a perspective of your nanny. Because he was talking, I guess he was making that moment about her. He was trying to write in his book. There we go. He was trying to write in a book about like how he thought his nanny was this great person and like this amazing person, and it was, but it wasn't from the nanny's perspective. And
of course not, because he didn't have her perspective. He can only talk from his perspective, right?
True. Yes.
And he may have seen her as not just a black woman, but his nanny. Somebody that was closer to him than maybe even his parents, right? That's true. So he probably wasn't looking at, I'm going to comfort this black woman. It's like, I'm going to comfort this person that I really care about to try to help her feel better. And I think that's probably why the nanny took it in a different way. of course he can't speak for her unless he actually interviewed her and asked her about the situation. But you know, that was something significant for him. So I just didn't, you know, I haven't heard the TED talk. But
I'm sure with you, because the whole, and he brought it up was because he's this black historian or this black teacher, and he has 2 twin boys, and his sons went to the school, and they were having this lesson about Rosa Parks. And they were teaching his kids that Rosa Parks was this old woman. She was tired. She just got off her shift. That's why she didn't want to move out of her seat. She was weary. And when he came back home, the dad was extremely pissed because that wasn't the perspective.
No.
How are you teaching black kids this information? That's not the truth. And so that's when he started to bring in different examples of, like, not saying that was a bad one, but like he's saying use a different one. There's a better example of you and your nanny where it elevates the perspective. And he's like, when you don't have that information, when you're not correcting someone who is used to the privilege that they do have, and you're not telling them, like, hey, have you ever thought about this in this way? And I understand you were a kid, but have you ever thought about that story in another way of how it went down, why your nanny was, you know, crying, you know, kind of have you question yourself about it, and then, like, okay, is this about me or is this about her, or is my privilege showing or is it not? So he was trying to get to the whole point where, like, we need to question that, because if we don't do that, then we have people who are teaching that Rosa Parks is old, she was tired, she got off a 8-hour shift, and I learned something in that TED talk. He's like, she worked a 6-hour shift. And
well, you know, I know a little bit. I'm a real big historian.
Okay, here we go.
Right, so she was actually not the first person, but I think that there was another girl who was 15 years old. And she was pregnant, so she didn't represent. She wasn't a good representation of, you know, of that movement. And so, you know, Rosa Parks worked at I think at NAACP. I'm gonna say NCAA. NAACP office, and they had been talking about somebody doing it, and so and that was sitting on the bus in the white area, right? And so she decided that day that she was going to do it. So it was something that was planned, but not necessarily for her to do it, but she took that moment and did it. Yeah. And
she just wasn't.
She wasn't just tired. You know, like
weary,
there was a system on buses where black people had to sit in the back. And,
I'm gonna see if I can find it too. You keep talking.
You know, Montgomery, it was in 1955, the Montgomery bus boycott that happened. And that was one of the times where, you know, people could see that the impact of not including people of color really affected their pockets, because I think that boycott went on for a few months, and they weren't making that money. So then they're like, you know what? We need to make money. We need to let these black people be able to get on the bus wherever, sit whatever they want. So that's how that came about. So you know,
so it's all money, and then that's when it
money. You know, we seeing stuff about black people and money today. You know, Us. Us was a #1 movie, and people think black people don't go to the movies. Oh, well,
there is a market for us, and there is a the black dollar holds weight. I'm sorry, and I would continue to say this. If you have a friend who is running an independent black business or any type of business their own, support them. Like, push their message. Like, why we're so used to competing with each other,
divisiveness,
but then we have these different cultures, we have these different businesses coming into our community, and we're supporting them, but we're not supporting each other, because we've been, and it's not just us, that's a part of our trauma from when we've been brought here through slavery, through not having rights to having rights, to be put up against one another, so we can continue that cycle. And it's
better if we're against each other.
Exactly, than with each other. And when people work together, the whole Nipsey thing, like all those people come together, that's beautiful. It's sad that it took someone's death for that to happen.
It always takes someone's death.
But that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful right there, that we can do that. And how many great things are happening, great minds are meeting that wouldn't have never met if that, you know, that death didn't happen. But like you said, if we work better together than separate. But I did find it. The TED Talk I was telling you about. So we're going to watch the first couple of minutes. I'm turning it down.
Oh, whitewashing. See, that's the okay. Now I see the title. It makes more sense. The dangers of whitewashing Black history. Yes, I do know that.
So I probably should have said that then.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is, I can see why
So
he
that's
made that comment.
why he told his friend not to put that
Yes.
message in there, because
Yes. That is, yes.
What'd you learn?
hopefully that was a good one.
Well, because I got my own story.
So that was that part.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get it.
So, and then that's why he had brought in that example. But yeah.
Yes, that's also hurting everybody.
Yeah.
It's the whitewashing of Black history. My daughter is in 5th grade, and there was this book she was reading for the Civil War. And she brought it home, and I'm like, okay, well, let's look at this. And it was a Choose Your Own Adventure book. And I said, Choose Your Own Adventure, Underground Railroad. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, I should read Choose Your Own Adventure books when I was a kid, but not this. So we get into it. The first page is, back in the Civil War times, up north, it was noisy and busy, and immigrants had come over and blah, 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 blah.
Oh, okay.
And so then we get to the bottom part, and it's like, but in the South, it was different. It was quieter. They had slaves. And that was basically it. And so I stopped her. I said, how did slaves get over here?
Yeah.
They didn't immigrate. They didn't immigrate. They just came over.
Like you had that top part that says everybody immigrating. Okay.
That's the way they were trying to portray it.
Portray it as.
And so we stopped. I said, how did slaves get over here? And she said, on ships. I said, and they were treated very inhumane. They were kidnapped. They did not come over here willingly. So that was like the first page.
That should have been a sentence at least in that book.
Right.
On that first
Not
page.
where they came from. They didn't even say they were African slaves. They just said slaves.
Slaves. Like, it was down south. It was different.
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh,
So
wow.
Yeah, I did not like that book whatsoever. There were 3 options. There was, you could be a slave, you could be a slave capturer, or you can be an abolitionist. So yes. So I don't know if you know about Choose Your Own Adventure books. But Choose Your Own Adventure books, it starts off with one story, and then you read a section, and then you get 2 options to go here or do that. You get to make one section, then you get to a point where you get to choose again. So it was like, if you choose to be a slave and you're going to try to escape, this is what could happen. This means this, as far as if this person's door, like, because back in the days they used to have these quilts that would say if the slave capturers were around, like there was a pattern that they used to have that people could read to say if it was okay if they could come into that house or not, or if there were slave capturers around. So,
wow.
Yeah, and so. Yeah, history. We don't learn it.
Yeah, we don't. I'm sorry, because she's educated me too. I'm like,
people
wow.
are afraid to teach it. It happened. What's gonna happen? We gonna revolt?
It's gonna happen. Like
that's the thing about it is people think that if we learn the true history, we're gonna revolt or take over. Dude, we 3%. We the 3rd population in America now, because like Latino people are number 2. Black people. We're not, people just need to know the truth. And because white people are a little frail, fragility, they don't want to be seen as these people who did this, but they were.
They were.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they don't know history enough to teach it either. Because I remember when I was in college.
Is that one of the dangers of whitewashing too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They don't, what can they teach if they don't know it themselves? They just have this whitewashing way,
or their experience.
Their experience, right?
Yeah.
And their experience is not with racism. I remember when I was in elementary school, I remember there was one page about slavery, and it wasn't about the ships or anything. It's just the slaves picked cotton. That's what they did. And that was just, you flip to the next page, right? And then the Civil War was because of, the fight to free slaves. No, it wasn't. That's not the real reason. It was economic. So anyway,
your history, guys.
Yeah,
your history.
yeah, it wasn't to free slaves.
A lot of people think that too.
Well, a lot of people also think that the Emancipation Proclamation freed all slaves. It did not.
It did not. No.
It just freed the slaves in the free states. I mean, in the Confederate states, but not the free states.
Enslaved.
Yep.
So
Yep. Abraham Lincoln didn't free no slaves. Okay. So anyway.
This tea is hot today, y'all.
So when I went to college, I didn't learn anything about slaves.
Unless you took like African American studies. African studies,
right? So after I took U.S. history, I did take African studies. But you know, in U.S. history, we're sitting in class, and you know how you have like the general, like the big speech halls where everybody's in there. So anyway, we get into the smaller classrooms to discuss U.S. history, and I think it was like to the Civil War, and we were talking about slaves, and everybody started looking at me.
Oh, shit.
Because I was the only black person in the class.
Yeah.
I'm like,
everybody's like,
I learned what you learned, which was nothing. So how could I speak about something that I didn't know about?
Yeah.
Right. So I still remember seeing Amistad. I saw that in the theaters. Because Roots came out, but you know, that was a long time ago. Roots came out when I was like 1. And of course they would still show it, but then you know, you wouldn't watch the whole thing because as a kid you were bored, right?
Yeah, they only show it like probably once a year, like
once a year, Black History Month,
time too.
You know, just like Eyes on the Prize, I always showed on that one day, Martin Luther King birthday, when you were sitting at home, and then they just showed like the whole thing, right?
That's all you get. That's your lesson.
But you know, that's a lot of what's holding us back, and so this is the treatment that people get. You know, being treated less than human comes from slavery, right? The thoughts that black people are not smart enough comes from slavery. And I think that we have sometimes bought into that as people of color, which is why, like you said, people aren't supporting black businesses because we're in that mindset of, oh, they don't know what they're doing, or we just have a whole lot of naysayers. But there's so many things that came before us that we haven't dealt with, but we're getting added and more and more. And so if you're, you know, it's the economic stress of paying rent. It's the economic stress of paying bills. We started out on credit, you know, back after slavery was over, and we had sharecroppers. My grandmother was a sharecropper in Mississippi.
Oh, snaps. Hey, Grandma.
Well, she's passed on. But she was a sharecropper, and so that whole system was when you went to the store, you put stuff on credit. This is how we learned how to do things, was to put it on credit. Credit messes us up because everything's tied now to, of course, credit scores. So, you know, we started from the bottom and we're still down there, you know? So that's the one thing is, as we are learning more about mental health, we also need to include other things. You know, financial. How to do budgets.
That's huge. I needed that a while ago.
Needs versus wants. What you need is different from what you want. And people don't understand that. We go for the small pleasures in life because we're not promised this life of happiness.
And the key point is too, like I like that you mentioned that. Like my cousin, she got like a financial advisor to help her, so she's like paying for that. And I'm like, man, you're doing that. Like, keep your notes, take your notes down, and share that. Share that, like for people who don't have access, like for other people in your family or friends that don't have access to that because they can't afford it, or you know, they can't just do it,
or don't know about it.
I don't even know about it, and that could really help because I'm like, man, that would go so far. Like you said, wants versus needs, like that is huge.
One other point that I did want to bring up about mental health, that I kind of knew, but after I worked in a women and children's shelter, and we did trauma informed. So trauma informed is therapy, is where you know someone has trauma and you work around ways to not necessarily get those triggers. You know, like definitely be softer in your approach with people. Recognize that they've had things in their life without this judgment.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I pride myself on, is not being judgmental, because, you know, they're like, you don't know my life. It's true. I don't know somebody's life. I don't know why this person went and wrote these fraudulent checks. Could it be because they didn't have any other way to feed their family?
Mm-hmm.
Can I really judge that?
Yeah. Was it the moral out of, like, was it ethical? No, like.
No, it wasn't. But it's about
it.
survival.
Yeah.
And a lot of things that happen in the street is about survival or just coping.
Yeah.
But back to the point about women. You know, as I was working in the shelter, and they talked about the women who were in the shelter, 75 to 80% of them had some kind of sexual trauma, right? And so that's the one thing we don't talk about in our community is the sexual violence that happens. It's not always some kind of stranger. Most of the time, it's somebody that they know, right? And they let it keep going on where nobody says anything. And everybody knows. They'll just say, don't leave your kids with blah, blah, blah. Why? Why are they not in jail?
Yeah. Why are we not saying nothing about it?
Right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these women, as we talk about this CAPE, they have these untalked about traumas, undiagnosed mental health disorders, and nobody to talk to, because people just don't talk about that.
Talk about it. And then that's just like with HIV. No one talks about it. And people are afraid to talk about it because it carries such a stigma. And it's kind of like, how do you expect to really, you know, not just break stigma, but like help yourself or help the case? And it's not that black and white. And I'm not saying it's that black and white, because there are a lot of things that go into it, why it doesn't be talked about. And I can't speak for everybody, but in situations where I found myself in those cases, I'm always gonna shoot for the underdog and be like, well, why didn't you say this? Well, you know, what was your reason? I'm always gonna ask, what was your reason? Not why didn't you do it, but like, what made you not want to say it? What made you not want to talk about that? Like,
there's so much shame and embarrassment in this world that keeps people from being who they are. You know, just even like people who are queer. Sometimes it takes a long time for LGBTQ people to come out because of what other people will think. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so that's how people just stay stuck. And they just keep getting weighted down, and it'll come out eventually. Not necessarily the way that they wanted it to, but yeah.
But my thing is with that too, like, I don't want anyone to see that as like me wanting to pressure them to tell me or tell them what it is, and not, you know, come out of their space of comfort. But it's like, if you were to tell me that, then maybe I can like share a bit of my empathy too, where we can then make that connection and then try to create something better. But not everyone has that mindset where like, if I divulge this type of information about myself.
Yeah, everybody always so worried about somebody telling somebody. Yeah. Because that's the way it is, right? And so, like, that's one of the things that I tell people when they come in and see me. You know, I'm a mandated reporter, right? So, if you're going to hurt anybody, if you're going to hurt yourself, or if there's any child abuse or elder abuse, you know, if you report that to me, I have to report it to other people, because that's doctor stuff and legal things, right? But everything else is going to stay in this room. Yeah. And so sometimes people just feel that weight come off of them because they don't have to keep playing this person that they are outside of the doors, right? And one more thing I wanted to add about the fact that people were being open. You know, about 2 weeks ago, it was announced that Lil Sean, I think that's his name, the rapper, Lil Sean. Yeah. Took a year off.
Oh, Big Sean. Yeah.
Big Sean, Lil Sean, Lil Wayne.
Yeah, right. I didn't make sure when you said it, I'm like, Big Sean, I know he took a year off. Yeah.
He took a year off to do therapy. Oh. And he admitted it. You know, the more people. All right. So now we're back from our little.
Our break.
What I was talking about with the more people are coming out and talking about their mental health.
Big Sean.
I said Big Sean, but I was also about to bring up, I don't know if you are so much into pop culture. This week, Britney Spears announced that she was going into a mental health facility. And some people were like, well, why did she announce it? I said, it's good that she announced it. One, because people are going to find out anyway from the tabloids.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so it just normalizes it.
And two, why would you say, did someone say why she announced it?
Yeah. Why did she tell anybody? The more that people are out, it normalizes things, so it doesn't necessarily seem like it's too different. Just like now, there are more people out in the community as with their identification, and even more so now who are transgender. You know, there was a time where they would just call people cross-dressers and all this stuff, and
dykes, or well, not transgender, but like people, women who affiliate as lesbian, like it's such a
bull dykes.
Bull dykes. Yep.
Yeah, and so now that stuff doesn't exist, where it's seen as a bad thing. You know, people are who they are. You know, gender is even fluid now. So it's just the acceptance. Once there's more acceptance, it'll be better, but it's still a struggle.
And that goes hand in hand with gossip, like just like not telling everyone, because I think that's key. Like in smaller communities, smaller Black communities, like Bloomington, it's not a huge Black community, but if you have that Black community presence, I feel like you're less likely to talk about your business because you don't want everybody to know your business.
That's true.
Versus like if you're in Chicago, not everyone, it's too huge. It's huge.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
when you go in a smaller piece, then it's even more of that
secretiveness.
And it's frightening. Not frightening, but it's just like it doesn't have to be that way. It can be
because
normalized.
the thing about it is, if other people know about it and it's something negative, you use that sense of support, even because it's not that many of you anyway.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
There's things you hide to try to protect yourself.
And then on top of that too, social media. Like, I'm gonna let everybody know this, and you have heard this before too, that like social media is nothing but a highlight reel, okay? Like it is unless you are like posting every single moment of your life on your social media. If you're not doing that, it's just a highlight reel of what's good going on in your life. So, and the only reason why I say that is because like I found people who are not. I have friends, including myself, that sometimes that compare themselves to different lives, and I think we need to just stop and realize that that's just a piece of what's going on in their life. It's not all of what's going on. Yeah, they're doing something that's great, and I forgot why I even brought that in.
Because social media can sometimes give you the perception that people's lives are good all the time.
There we go. See, I need to bring Denika more with me everywhere I go, because this happens to me all the time. Just because you're having you're highlighting the good moments of your life doesn't mean you can't have bad moments in your life. Like I'm on my social media, I'm having things that are going on in my life that y'all don't know, I'll probably be at home crying or whatever. I could be talking to my mom, she could be fatally wounded or something, but I'm not posting about that. We are human. So if
But you know what? When people actually say how they're really doing, people don't know how to deal with it. That's why when people say, "Oh, how you doing?" you just say, "I'm okay."
Yeah, I hate that.
Not like, "Oh, I just failed this test," and like, I'm right.
Yeah.
It's just like you just have to give a blanket answer because then you don't want someone else to feel overwhelmed by what you're feeling. So
that, and being open, being able to talk about it too. Yeah. I think, because I always have like I think I come to the term of like always asking my friends, well, how are you doing? And and they give me like a short answer. I'm like, okay, well, and then I start talking, and I'm just like, okay, you sound like you got some stuff going on. Like, let's talk about that. Like, clearly
But see, that's the thing, you're invested. Not everybody's invested. It's like a pleasantry or like, say, how you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm good. You have a good weekend? Yeah.
I do that at work because
you don't want them to be all in your business or know everything that's going on in your life. So I think that's why people don't say how they truly feel.
Yep.
So.
And that's the scary part, because we do that in certain environments. Like I definitely find myself doing that at work a lot, but it's so ironic that I do that, and like I have a whole desk with just like HIV, queer, I got my rainbow flag, all this queer stuff there, and it was like, them to know everything about me at this point in time. Do I need to like fix that, or should I invest in like pieces?
You know what? Everybody should know everything about you anyway.
That's true.
Unless you really trust them.
Unless we're married.
Yeah. No, I think no one can really know everything about you, because even we don't know everything about ourselves. So, but to be able to open up to somebody is about trust, and you can't trust everybody.
Some of the traumas that you've come across with, and I'm of course not telling you to talk about your clients, but like, what are the common things that you notice with your clients, or some of the traumas that you are seeing more often than not? And if you're seeing them, like for example, clients are coming in about depression and anxiety, very high levels of that. Is there something that someone who don't have access to a therapist or to counseling that they can do to try to get help for that?
Well,
so that's a two-part answer.
That is a
two-part question. Yeah.
Basically, a lot of the trauma has to do with relationships. And I have to say, relationships with parents. I feel, and I bring this up a lot, and we talked about it, slavery has ruined the lives of Black people. You know, the fact that people were torn away, family systems were broken down, nothing was ever done to repair that. So, you know, the way that we sometimes, you know, people have issues with their mothers, where they feel like they weren't loved by their mother. Affection is something that is not necessarily done a lot in Black families, right?
Yeah.
And what do we take that back to? Well, back during slavery, you couldn't really get too close to anybody because you weren't gonna. They could be sold away, right? And so people have built this tough skin to try to survive, and it's more like, I'm gonna do what I need to do, and you hear this all the time.
Yeah.
You got shelter over your head, and you got food. That's it.
Yep.
Where's the love? Where is the I love you, I care about you? You know, they always talk about tough love.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be so tough.
Yeah.
People should be able to express their feelings. And I think that's also one of the issues that has broken down the community, is people don't know how to express how they feel unless it's anger. And anger is the one thing that everybody understands, right? You can see anger, you can feel it, but you can't see someone's heart being broken or jealousy or something like that. It's going to come out in one way, and usually that does a lot more damage, right? So that creates more trauma, whether it's through violence. And so, you know, somebody getting killed or somebody dying. Because a lot of people, I've worked with different populations, and, you know, as far as death and grief in African Americans, it's like people don't prepare for death.
Yeah, we don't do that.
We don't. So how many times has someone died, and y'all all go over to the house, and then they say, how much money can you give? Because they didn't have an insurance policy, there was no plan. That's another financial barrier or issue that people have to deal with.
We don't prepare for.
You know, so there's a lot of being in the moment instead of thinking ahead. And if we're thinking ahead, it's more worry. So that creates more anxiety, right? And the depression has to do with things aren't getting better for us, because the system is stacked up against us.
Yes.
You know, I did not come from, I came from a two-parent home. Both my parents worked. You know, I did good in school, but I had to still take out student loans. And then I went to grad school and I took out some more student loans. So I'm going to have to say that my loans are going to outlive me, because I'm never going to probably pay them all off. You know, so if you start off in the hole and you're still trying to dig yourself up, but then you get all these other responsibilities that's putting you down deeper, how can you feel hopeful?
How can you?
So therein lies a lot more depression.
Jeez.
Yes, it's sad. It's sad, but it's life for us, right?
It is. It is.
And so the second part of that question
Solutions.
is solutions.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of issues that we have are outside of us and we feel like we can't control. And so how can we control things? And so I'll tell people this all the time, and they'll be like, well, I don't know about that. Meditation.
Huge piece.
People meditate when they pray. I'm not against that. I am a religious person. I'm a Christian. I do believe in God and Jesus and all of that, but there's also other types of meditation that you can do. And there's an app that I usually tell people about to put on their phones, and you could also go to their website.
Okay.
I am not paid by these people, just so I'll get it out there.
Start getting a sponsor.
It's called Calm.
Calm.
And it's this blue, it says Calm, and it's this blue symbol, and you go into it, and it has these different scenes where it could be the beach, it could be rain, just all these different sceneries, and you can just listen to that. And sometimes you can just close your eyes and visualize that. But there are also sleep stories on there for people who have problems sleeping.
That's cool.
There are different ways to meditate if you're anxious, if you're depressed, or there's songs on there. So it's a lot of different things on there. And that's usually the first thing that I tell to people is to put that on there and practice.
Yeah.
Practice, because if you're in a situation where you're too overwhelmed, you're not going to be able to turn it on and do it if you haven't practiced. That's just like you going into the 3-point contest and you have never shot a 3-pointer.
All right, here we go.
Right? So, meditation is something that I tell people to do. Journaling, because we hold so many things in, and sometimes getting them out. You may not have to read it right then in that moment because sometimes it can just be overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
You wrote all this stuff in it, but it shows growth later. So years later, and you find this book and say, man, that's where I was.
Yeah.
Look at where I am now. Right?
I have a journal that I wrote back when I was diagnosed, and I'm like, wow, like I was in such a dark place.
Yeah.
Like, woo. And then just look at where I'm at now. Is you're able to reflect and like, man, that this helps, because you're like, man, it could have been worse than that. It could have been a lot worse. And if you were in my case, you like saw your suicide letter, you're like, man, like it could have been done right then and there. But it's like, yo, I'm still hearing so many great things have happened since then.
Life usually gets better, especially if you're making choices that are for the best.
For the best, yes,
right?
Yes.
So that's what meditation and journaling. Also, with anxiety, there are these what they call cognitive distortions that
that sounds interesting. That sounds interesting.
You can look it up. It's like 11 or 12 of them, but it's like this whole thing about black and white thinking. It's either this way or this way, all or nothing. You've heard these terms before.
Yeah.
Instead of giving yourself some of that gray, because it's either this way or this way. It's very strict, and you cannot break that down. And of course, that keeps you stuck in one place. But if you can start to see the variations of gray, then you'll loosen up on yourself. So that's just the first one.
That's a huge piece, because like I'm gonna give like a great example with that. Like we're all tied to bills. The thing is, you don't have to immediately pay off a bill, or it affects your credit score. Like you can pay portions of a bill, and that's like the gray.
They just
right
want
there.
their money.
Yeah. Did you have anything you wanted to say to me, to my audience, to just the general population?
Well, I think this is a very important topic, mental health. I feel like it's also growing and becoming more accepted. It may not work that first time or the second time. You just have to find that right person who's a fit for you. And you can't work with everybody. I don't work with everybody. Some people have come to me and felt like this is not what I need.
Yeah.
It's not personal. It's just being able to sit down and tell your story, because when you're able to get things out and things feel a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
I can't say how many times I've seen a person one time and then they come back and I say, well, how is it? I feel a little bit better.
A little better.
So, yeah, I just say give it a try. They don't have to be people of color if you don't want them to be, but I've always said that it's always been easier.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Well, I'm going to be including Danika's information here as well as the information that we talked about in this episode. You can find information in the description and all those resources. Again, thank you guys for watching Hopeful in Victory Talks. I am Dusty Lion, and like I say in every episode, if you want to break stigma, it starts with that awkward conversation and just building from there. Let it be messy, let it be beautiful, let it be ugly, let it be uncomfortable, but just know that the end result is going to be elevating. It's going to evolve you. So again, go out there, be great. I love you guys. You have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.